Ambassador Tay stood motionless before the observation window, his four-fingered hands clasped tightly behind his back. The view before him would haunt him until his final breath. His homeworld, once covered in swirling purple clouds and gleaming silver cities, now burned with crimson fires visible even from orbit. The Void Dominion attack had been swift and merciless. "Sir," a soft voice called from behind him. "The last evacuation ships are docking now." Tay didn't turn to face his aide. "How many made it off the surface, June?" There was a pause before June answered. "Just under 3 million, sir. About 12% of the population." Tay closed his large almond-shaped eyes, allowing himself one moment of grief before duty called him back. The rescue fleet, what remained of it, hung in space around them, a collection of civilian vessels and damaged military ships. They had fought bravely, but the Dominion weapons had torn through their defenses like they weren't even there. "That's the 15th world we've lost in 60 days, Tay said, finally turning away from the window. The command deck of the vessel hummed with quiet activity as the crew worked to coordinate the refugees and plot their jump to safety. "Where's the council now?" "They've relocated to the 7th moon of Corlin," June replied, his skin shifting to a pale blue, a sign of distress among their people. "They've called an emergency session. Your presence is requested." "Of course it is," Tay muttered. "They refused to listen when I warned them about the Dominion's expansion. Now they want solutions." The journey to Corlin was tense. Tay spent most of it reviewing reports from the front lines, each one worse than the last. The Galactic Concord, a peaceful confederation of 32 alien species spread across more than 200 worlds, was facing extinction. Their weapons were designed for policing and limited conflicts, not total war. The Void Dominion didn't share such restraint. The council chamber on Corlin's moon was crowded when he arrived. Representatives from all remaining conquered worlds had gathered, their varied forms filling the circular room with a riot of colors, shapes, and nervous energy. The air smelled of fear. High Counselor Lee, an elder whose translucent skin had long ago lost its youthful glow, called for silence. Ambassador Tay has arrived from Pelax. He witnessed the fall firsthand. All eyes turned to Tay as he took his place at the speaking platform. "Honored Council," he began, "Pelax has fallen. Our military forces were overwhelmed in under 3 days. The pattern matches the previous attacks. The Dominion targets communication arrays first, then power distribution, then water purification. They're not just conquering us, they're studying how to break us most efficiently." "What do you propose?" "Ambassador, we've tried peace negotiations," called out a representative from the mineral-based Jiao species. "More ships, more weapons?" asked another. "We cannot build them fast enough." Tay took a deep breath. The proposal he was about to make had been rejected 3 times already. But with 15 worlds burned and millions dead, perhaps now they would listen. "We need to contact the humans," he said firmly. The chamber erupted in shouts. Some delegates rose from their seats, gesturing wildly with various appendages. High Counselor Lee banged his ceremonial staff for order. "The Deathworlders?" hissed Counselor Pack, her feathered crest flaring with alarm. "You would bring those predators into our territory?" Tay stood his ground. "The humans have the most powerful fleet in the explored galaxy. They evolved on a planet that would kill most of us within minutes. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic oxygen levels, and filled with apex predators. Their bodies are dense with muscle, their reflexes honed by thousands of generations of survival against the odds. That's precisely why we established the containment zone around their space," argued another counselor. "They're too dangerous to interact with." "More dangerous than extinction," Tay countered. "The humans have achieved peace among themselves. They've developed art, philosophy, music. Yes, they're physically formidable, and their ships are built like war machines. But they haven't expanded beyond their agreed borders in 50 years. Counselor Min, whose species had had limited trade with humans before the containment policy, spoke up. "The ambassador isn't wrong. Humans can be reasonable, Frightening, yes, but they understand cooperation. After hours of heated debate, the vote was called. By a narrow margin, the council approved Tay's proposal. He was given authority to send a distress call beyond the containment zone, directly, to Earth. Back aboard his ship, Tay worked with his communications team to craft the message. It needed to be honest about their desperate situation, but carefully worded to appeal to human sensibilities. Begin transmission, he ordered as the final version was approved. As the signal was sent into the void, June approached him privately. Sir, if they do come, what then? The stories about human warfare. I know. Tay interrupted softly. I've studied their history. Their capacity for violence exceeds anything in the conquered. But here's what most don't understand about humans. They're also fiercely protective of those they consider under their care. And if they decide we're not worth protecting? Tay looked out at the stars, wondering if somewhere out there, human eyes were already watching. Then we were doomed anyway. The transmission would take 3 days to reach Earth, 3 days to wonder if they'd made the right choice. 3 days to prepare the conquered for their first contact with the species they'd feared for generations. What no one in the council chamber could possibly imagine was just how dramatically the galaxy was about to change. The message from deep space arrived at Earth's Central Communications Array at 3:17 a.m. local time. Duty Officer Park had been halfway through her coffee when the priority alert flashed across her screen. She almost choked when she saw the origin coordinates. Holy, that's from beyond the containment zone, she muttered, setting down her mug and initiating the verification protocols. Within 20 minutes, the entire command structure of the United Terrain Federation was awake and assembling. By sunrise, the translated message had been authenticated and forwarded to military command and the Federation Parliament. Admiral Kang stood before the large view screen in the war room of the UTF headquarters, replaying the alien distress call for the 5th time. At 53, she had spent more than half her life in space, commanding vessels of increasing size and importance. The scars on her face told the story of the Unification Wars, humanity's last great conflict before they turned their eyes to the stars. Play it again, she ordered, pacing slowly across the polished floor. The desperate face of Ambassador Tay filled the screen once more. To the leaders of Earth and the human territories. We, the Galactic Conquered, face extinction at the hands of an aggressive force known as the Void Dominion. They have destroyed 15 of our worlds. Millions dead. Our weapons cannot stop them. We are a peaceful confederation with limited military capacity. We request your aid in this desperate hour. We know of humanity's strength and resilience. We ask you to extend that protection to us. Kang paused the playback on the alien's face. The fear in those large eyes was unmistakable, even across species. What do we know about this Galactic Conquered? Asked Defense Minister Yu, who had just entered the room. Commander Han, Kang's tactical officer, brought up a holographic display. 32 species spread across approximately 200 habitable worlds, mostly peaceful. Their technology is impressive in some areas, especially medicine and faster-than-light travel, but their weapon systems are designed for policing, not warfare. And this Void Dominion? Yu asked. Less information available, Han admitted. They appeared at the edges of conquered space about 2 years ago. Highly aggressive, no successful diplomatic contact. They seem to target worlds systematically, starting with communication infrastructure. Admiral Kang studied the tactical overlay of Concord space. They're being methodical. This isn't random aggression, it's a calculated campaign of conquest or extermination. The door slid open again as more officials entered. Representatives from the Parliament's Defense Committee, science advisors, and diplomatic corps. The room quickly filled with the quiet murmur of urgent conversations. 5 hours later, Admiral Kang found herself standing before the full Federation Parliament, presenting her assessment of the situation. The Grand Chamber, with its curved rows of seats climbing up the walls, was packed with representatives from every human settlement, from Earth to the farthest colonies. The Concord's request presents both opportunity and risk, she concluded, after laying out the tactical situation. Opportunity to establish ourselves as a responsible galactic power, and potentially gain valuable allies. Risk, because we would be committing our forces to a conflict far from our territory against an enemy we know little about. President Jin, a small woman with steel-gray hair and a reputation for directness, addressed the admiral. Your recommendation, Admiral Kang. Kang didn't hesitate. We should respond. The 7th Expeditionary Fleet is already equipped for deep space operations. With some modifications to their loadout, they could be ready to deploy within 10 days. Representative from Mars stood up. The containment zone was established for a reason. These aliens have avoided contact with us for generations because they fear us. Now that they're in trouble, suddenly we're acceptable? Why should human lives be risked for species that wanted nothing to do with us? Kang had expected this argument. The containment zone was mutual, Counselor. We agreed to it as much as they did. As for why we should help, she paused, gathering her thoughts. Throughout our history, humanity has been at its best when extending a hand to those in need. We've made mistakes, certainly, but we've learned from them. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for isolation, others for full military intervention. Eventually, President Jin called for a vote. By a margin of 63 votes, the Parliament authorized the deployment of the 7th Fleet to conquered space. Admiral Kang was given command of the expedition. Back in her quarters that night, Kang reviewed the Concord data packages one final time. Commander Han had brought the latest fleet readiness reports. We'll have 87 vessels ready in 8 days, Han said. The engineers are working round the clock to adapt our weapon systems. The problem is we don't know if our standard armaments will be effective against this Dominion. Kang nodded slowly. Pack heavy. Better to have options we don't need than need options we don't have. Han hesitated before asking, should we inform the Conquered of our full capabilities? Our combat protocols are different from theirs. Kang thought about this. The Concord's transmissions revealed much about their approach to conflict. They prioritized disabling enemy vessels, minimizing casualties even in combat. Human warfare had evolved differently. No, she decided after a moment. The Dominion almost certainly monitors their communications. Better they learn what we're capable of when we arrive. She turned to face her old friend and colleague. How do you feel about this mission, Han? Han considered the question carefully. Honestly, I think these aliens have no idea what they've asked for. Their weapons disable, ours destroy. He paused. But I also think that sometimes destruction is what's needed. Kang looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, worlds were burning while a peaceful civilization faced extinction. Inform all captains. Mission briefing at 0600. I want every ship ready for departure in 1 week. She turned back to Han with determination in her eyes. It's time the galaxy learned what happens when you back humanity into a corner, even if we're standing in someone else's corner when it happens. As the news spread throughout Earth and the colonies, a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension filled the population. For the first time in human history, they would be fighting alongside aliens, defending worlds they had never seen, against an enemy they did not know. The age of isolation was over. The Concord observation post hummed with nervous energy. Word had spread quickly that the humans had responded to their distress call and were on their way. Now, hundreds of officials from across the remaining conquered worlds had gathered to witness their arrival. Ambassador Tay stood at the front of the observation deck, trying to project calm confidence despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. Any sign of them yet? Asked Counselor Sue, a tall, willowy being whose translucent skin pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her nervousness. Not yet, Tay replied. Their message indicated they would arrive within this hour. The vast view screen showed only empty space at the designated coordinates, a careful distance from the station, as suggested by Tay. He had insisted on this precaution, knowing that the appearance of human vessels might shock his people. Nearby, General Jin of the Concord Defense Force studied tactical readouts with intense concentration. These specifications, they sent, he muttered. If accurate, their ships are excessive. Tay nodded. They evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme weather patterns and predators. Everything about them reflects that heritage. Still, Jin countered, why would exploration vessels need such armor, such power systems? It's as if they... A sudden alert cut him off. The sensor officer's voice came over the speakers. Incoming. Transitions detected at the arrival coordinates. The entire room fell silent. On the massive view screen, space itself seemed to ripple and tear. One by one, massive shapes emerged from the distortion, angular, dark vessels that resembled nothing in the conquered fleet. They didn't have the smooth, rounded shapes preferred by conquered engineers. These ships had edges, angles, armored plating clearly visible even at this distance. By the ancient stars, whispered someone behind Tay. Those aren't exploration vessels. Tay swallowed hard. No, he agreed quietly. Those are warships. The human fleet continued to emerge. Dozens of vessels in various sizes, arranging themselves in a precise formation. The largest ship, positioned centrally, was enormous. Easily, 3 times the size of the largest conquered vessel. Even at a distance, weapon emplacements were clearly visible along its hull. They've sent their military, Counselor Sue said, her skin flashing pale with shock. Not diplomats, not aid workers, soldiers. What else would they send against the Dominion? Tay countered, though he too felt a chill at the sight of such obvious martial power. This is why we contacted them. The communications officer called out, "Incoming transmission from the human fleet." A moment later, a human face appeared on the screen. Female with dark eyes and hair cropped short against her head. Her expression was composed, professional, showing neither friendliness nor hostility. "This is Admiral Kang of the United Terran Federation's 7th Fleet. We are responding to your distress call. Request permission to dock a shuttle at your station for direct consultation." Tay stepped forward. "This is Ambassador Tay of the Galactic Concord. Permission granted, Admiral. We welcome your assistance and will prepare for your arrival." As the transmission ended, the room erupted in hushed conversations. Tay turned to General Jin. "Prepare a security detail, respectful, not threatening, and alert the High Council representatives. I want our best xenobiologists and cultural experts present as well." "You think they'll be offended by our security?" Jin asked. Tay shook his head. "No, I think they'll expect it, and they'll have their own. Just make sure our people understand. Do not make any sudden movements around the humans. Their reflexes are faster than ours." 2 hours later, Tay stood in the main docking bay as the airlock cycled. The human shuttle had attached with precision to their station, a sleek, dark craft that somehow managed to look threatening even at rest. The inner door slid open. The humans who stepped through were nothing like the diplomatic recordings Tay had studied. Admiral Kang led the group, shorter than he expected but moving with unmistakable authority. Behind her came 4 officers and 2 individuals who, based on their different uniforms, Tay guessed were specialists of some kind. All of them moved, with the same controlled efficiency, their eyes constantly scanning the room, taking in details, assessing. "Ambassador Tay," Admiral Kang said, stepping forward and offering a slight bow. "Thank you for your welcome." Up close, the differences were even more apparent. The humans' bodies were dense with muscle beneath their uniforms. They stood differently, balanced, as if permanently ready to move in any direction. Most striking were their eyes, alert, intense, missing nothing. "Admiral Kang," Tay replied with the traditional Concord greeting gesture. "We are grateful for your swift response to our call for aid." As they walked through the station toward the council chambers, Tay noticed how the other Concord species reacted to the humans, stepping back slightly, conversations hushing as they passed. The humans, for their part, seemed unbothered by the alien surroundings, though Tay caught them exchanging glances at certain features of the station. In the council chamber, the human officers took their places at the large circular table. "Hi." Counselor Lee opened the proceedings with formal welcomes, which Admiral Kang acknowledged with polite efficiency. "We've reviewed the tactical data you provided," Kang said, cutting directly to the heart of the matter. "We'll need updated information on Dominion fleet movements and current defensive positions. The directness caught several counselors off guard. Concord meetings typically began with extended pleasantries and contextual discussions. "Of course," General Jin replied, activating the holographic display in the center of the table. "The Dominion forces have established forward bases in these 3 systems. Their main fleet was last detected here, moving toward Nexus Prime." Admiral Kang studied the display, then made a gesture to one of her officers, who stepped forward, with a data device. "With your permission, we'd like to upload our tactical assessment." The holographic display shifted as human data merged with the Concord information. Suddenly, the strategic situation became clearer and more alarming. The human analysis showed vulnerabilities and patterns that Concord military leaders had missed. "Based on their movement patterns and attack sequences, we believe their next major assault will target Nexus Prime," Kang stated. "We'll engage them there." "Nexus Prime is already under siege," protested Counselor Su. "We've been trying to evacuate civilians for weeks." Kang's expression didn't change. "Exactly. It's where they're committing resources, which means it's where we can do the most damage to their fleet." The bluntness of this assessment, the casual mention of inflicting damage rather than defending, sent a ripple of unease through the Concord representatives. "You intend to attack them directly?" asked General Jin, surprise evident in his voice. "Our forces have been focused on defensive actions and civilian evacuation." One of the human officers, Commander Han, Tay recalled from the introductions, spoke up. "With respect, General, defensive actions haven't slowed their advance. The Dominion has taken 15 of your worlds because they don't expect significant counterattacks. We'll change that expectation," Admiral Kang added simply. As the meeting continued, Tay observed the growing realization among his people. The humans weren't just powerful allies. They were fundamentally different in how they approached conflict. Where the conquered sought to minimize harm and find peaceful solutions even in the midst of war, these humans spoke of targets, strategic value, and acceptable losses. They had begged for help, and help had arrived. But as Tay watched Admiral Kang calmly discussing battle plans that would certainly result in thousands of deaths on both sides, he wondered if they truly understood what they had invited into their space. Help had indeed arrived, with armor, weapons, and the cold efficiency of predators. Nexus Prime had once been a jewel of the Concord, a world where 5 different species had built thriving communities across its varied ecosystems. Now, after weeks of Dominion attacks, its orbital platforms were shattered, its cities burning. The last conquered defensive ships had retreated days ago, leaving only automated beacons that continued to broadcast the desperate cries of those trapped on the surface. Ambassador Tay stood in the Concord Command Center, surrounded by military officials from 12 different species. They had gathered in this secure facility deep within an asteroid field to witness the human response to the Dominion threat. The atmosphere was tense, filled with equal parts hope and dread. "The human fleet has dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system," announced the sensor officer, her scaled hands moving rapidly over the control panel. The main view screen activated, showing tactical displays of Nexus Prime's star system. The Dominion fleet, over 60 vessels of various sizes, held position above the planet. Their black, almost organic-looking ships resembled a swarm of insects devouring their prey. In contrast, the human vessels appeared at the system's edge, maintaining tight formation. "They're outnumbered," observed General Jin, his expression grim. "Even with their technology, the Dominion force is substantially larger." Tay said nothing, watching as Admiral Kang's voice came through the communications system. "All vessels combat formation Delta. Cruiser group, prepare for jump to secondary positions. Frigate squadrons, forward screen deployment." What happened? Next stunned everyone in the command center. The human fleet didn't advance as a single unit as Concord tactics would dictate. Instead, it seemed to explode outward, ships breaking formation in what initially looked like chaos. Smaller vessels accelerated at speeds that made several Concord officers gasp. The larger ships moved more deliberately, but no less purposefully. "What are they doing?" asked Counselor Su, her bioluminescent patterns flashing with confusion. "They've lost all defensive cohesion." General Jin leaned forward, studying the tactical display with growing amazement. No, they haven't lost cohesion. This is intentional. He paused, searching for the right words. They're hunting. On the display, the human fleet had completely scattered. Some vessels used Nexus Prime's moons as cover, others dropped into lower orbits. The Dominion fleet, clearly surprised by these tactics, began to break its own formation, ships moving to intercept the scattered human vessels. "This is madness," whispered one of the Concord tacticians. "They'll be picked off individually." The first exchange of fire proved him wrong. A group of 3 human destroyers emerged from behind a moon, weapons blazing. The energy signatures were off the charts, far more powerful than anything the Concord had fielded. 2 Dominion vessels simply ceased to exist, turned into expanding clouds of debris. A third listed helplessly, its propulsion systems destroyed. Before anyone could comment, 5 more engagements erupted across the system. The human ships moved in coordinated groups of 2 or 3, striking hard and then changing position immediately. They didn't maintain steady fire as Concord ships would. They delivered overwhelming force in concentrated bursts. "Look at the energy readings," said a Concord engineer, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're channeling their entire power grid into weapons for seconds at a time, then rerouting to shields and engines. The precision required for such transitions is..." She was interrupted as the largest human vessel, Admiral Kang's flagship, finally entered the fray. It accelerated directly toward the heart of the Dominion fleet, seemingly on a suicide course. 3 Dominion capital ships moved to intercept, concentrating their fire on the approaching threat. "Incoming transmission," called the communications officer. Admiral Kang's voice filled the command center, calm and controlled despite the chaos visible on the tactical displays. "Initiating Phase 2. All vessels acknowledge reception of transmission package Gamma." "What's happening?" Tay asked. "What's transmission package Gamma?" His question was answered as every human ship simultaneously adjusted its positioning. Like a complex puzzle, suddenly solved, their apparently random movements revealed themselves as precisely calculated positions. Dozens of small objects launched from the human vessels, too small to be ships, too fast to be conventional missiles. "Those are nuclear devices," General Jin said quietly, his voice a mixture of horror and awe. "Tactical nuclear weapons." The detonations weren't in contact with the Dominion ships. They exploded in carefully plotted positions throughout the battlefield. The electromagnetic pulses created a cascading wave of disruption that washed over the Dominion fleet. Ship after ship lost power, weapons systems failed, and shields collapsed. Into this created chaos, the human vessels surged forward in perfect coordination. Like predators who had separated the weak from the herd, they targeted the disabled Dominion ships with terrifying efficiency. "Their communications should be completely disrupted by those EMPs," said the Concord communications specialist. "How are they still coordinating?" General Jin's expression showed dawning comprehension. "They're not communicating, at least not actively. This was pre-planned. They knew their communications would be knocked out by their own weapons." "That's impossible," argued another officer. "No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. How could they predict?" "They didn't predict," Tay interrupted softly. "They practiced. They've trained to fight while communications blind." The realization silenced the room. The implications were staggering. A species that regularly practiced, fighting in conditions that would render conquered forces helpless. On the main view screen, the battle continued to unfold. The Dominion fleet, accustomed to facing the measured, almost ceremonial combat style of the conquered, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that followed none of the expected rules. Human ships took damage, deliberately in some cases, to create openings for devastating counterattacks. "They're willing to sacrifice their own vessels," noted Sue with horror. "Look there. That destroyer changed course to protect the damaged cruiser, placing itself in the line of fire." "Not sacrifice," corrected Jin. "Calculate. That destroyer has stronger forward shields. The cruiser's weapon systems are still operational. While the destroyers are damaged, it's a tactical decision." After 3 hours of battle, the outcome was clear. The Dominion fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind more than half their vessels as drifting wreckage. The human fleet regrouped, their formation ragged now, 7 ships had been destroyed completely, with many others showing significant damage. Admiral. Kang's face appeared on the command center screen. Despite a visible cut across her forehead and smoke filling the bridge behind her, her expression remained composed. Nexus Prime is secured, she reported simply. Request conquered medical vessels. For civilian evacuation and wounded personnel, we've lost 7 ships and approximately 3,000 crew members. Enemy forces are in retreat beyond the system boundary. The casualty numbers sent a shock through the command center. For the conquered, such losses would be considered catastrophic, unthinkable. Yet the human admiral delivered the information as if reporting routine statistics. Acceptable losses, one of the human officers behind her added almost as an afterthought. As the transmission ended, silence filled the Concord command center. They had witnessed something beyond their experience. Warfare conducted with an intensity and acceptance of violence that their cultures had long ago rejected. They fight like nothing I've ever seen, General Jin finally said, breaking the silence. It's not just their technology or their tactics. It's their mindset. They expect casualties. They plan for them. Ambassador Tay nodded slowly. Remember what they told us about their homeworld? Everything there evolved to survive under harsh conditions. The humans didn't just bring their ships and weapons to this fight. They brought their entire evolutionary history. The Dominion had been pushed back from Nexus Prime. For the first time since the invasion began, a conquered world had been successfully defended. But as the assembled officials quietly filed out of the command center, their relief was tempered by a new concern. They had invited predators into their midst, and now they had seen what those predators could do. 2 weeks after the Battle of Nexus Prime, life within conquered space had changed dramatically. The Dominion forces had pulled back to regroup, giving the battered civilization its first respite in months. But the reprieve came with its own kind of tension. Ambassador Tay stood at the viewport of his private quarters aboard the conquered diplomatic vessel, watching as shuttles moved between the rebuilt orbital station and the planet below. Nexus Prime was healing slowly. Relief efforts led by both Concord aid workers and human engineering teams had restored basic services to the main population centers. Yet evidence of the battle remained. Twisted metal from destroyed ships occasionally drifted through the spacecraft lanes despite constant cleanup efforts. Most noticeable, however, was the presence of human vessels throughout the system. 3 capital ships maintained position at strategic points, while smaller craft patrolled regular routes between the jump points. Their angular, armored forms stood in stark contrast to the sleek Concord designs. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. "Ambassador," came his aide's voice through the speaker. "The council's session has ended. They've requested your presence in Chamber 3. Tay sighed. "Another debate about our new protectors?" "I believe so, sir." General Jin presented his latest report on human fleet deployments. "I'll be right there." The walk through the diplomatic vessel gave Tay time to organize his thoughts. The Concord leadership was deeply divided over the human presence. Some celebrated their salvation from the Dominion. Others whispered concerns about trading one threat for another. Chamber 3 was smaller than the main council hall, designed for confidential discussions. As Tay entered, conversations hushed. Around the oval table sat representatives from the remaining conquered worlds, fewer faces than there should have been, a constant reminder of their losses. High Counselor Lee nodded to Tay. "Ambassador, thank you for joining us. We've been discussing General Jin's latest intelligence briefing." Jin activated the holographic display in the center of the table. A map of conquered space appeared, dotted with small markers representing human vessels. "As you can see," Jin explained, "the humans have established defensive positions throughout our territory. Their fleet has split into 12 battle groups, each assigned to protect specific systems." "Protection or occupation?" asked Counselor Pak. Her feathered crest flattened against her head in a sign of distress. "They didn't consult us about these deployments." "They informed us," corrected Jin. Admiral Kang provided full details of their strategic positioning. "After, their ships were already in place," Pak countered. Tay studied the display. The human fleet had indeed spread throughout conquered space with remarkable efficiency. More concerning were the new markers that appeared at various asteroid belts and uninhabited moons. "What are these installations?" he asked, pointing to the unfamiliar symbols. Jin's expression tightened. "Mining operations. The humans have deployed automated systems to extract resources from our asteroid fields. When questioned, they stated it was for on-site repair and resupply purposes." This revelation sent a ripple of unease around the table. "They're extracting our resources without permission?" asked a representative from one of the outer colonies. "They claim it's necessary for maintaining their fleet so far from their territory," Jin replied. "And technically, most of these locations fall outside established planetary claims." Tay considered this information carefully. After a moment of internal debate, he made his decision. "I need to speak with Admiral Kang directly," he announced. "Not through official channels or diplomatic exchanges, a private conversation. I believe I've earned enough goodwill to request that." Some counselors looked ready to object, but High Counselor Lee raised a hand for silence. "I believe that's wise, Ambassador. You've worked with the humans more closely than anyone. Perhaps you can get answers where our formal inquiries have failed." 3 hours later, Tay's shuttle docked with the UTS Horizon, Admiral Kang's flagship. The vessel had been repaired since the battle, though evidence of the damage remained visible in sections of newer plating along its hull. A human officer escorted him through corridors bustling with activity. Tay noticed how the crew moved with purpose, their conversations focused and direct. There was none of the ceremonial formality that would accompany a diplomatic visit on a conquered vessel, just efficient professionalism. Admiral Kang received him in what appeared to be her personal quarters rather than a formal meeting room. The space was spartanly furnished, with several displays showing tactical information and ship status reports. "Ambassador Tay," she greeted, him rising from her desk. "This is an unexpected visit. Thank you for agreeing to see me on such short notice, Admiral." She gestured to a chair. "I assume this isn't a routine diplomatic check-in?" Tay appreciated the directness. It made what he needed to say easier. "It isn't," he confirmed, taking the offered seat. "I'm here because my people are growing concerned about the nature of your fleet's deployment throughout our territory." Kang's expression remained neutral. "We're establishing defensive positions as agreed. The Dominion has retreated but not surrendered." "And the mining operations in our asteroid fields?" She didn't hesitate. "Earth is far, Ambassador. We can't rely on supply lines stretching across half the galaxy. We need local resources to maintain our vessels and construct defensive platforms. You could have asked permission. Would it have been granted quickly enough to matter?" There was no accusation. In her tone, just a practical question. Tay considered this. The Concord's deliberative processes were notoriously slow, with decisions requiring consensus across multiple species and worlds. "My people are frightened," he admitted finally. "Not of the Dominion now, but of you. Monitoring stations report. Your ships establishing positions throughout our space. We're grateful, but concerned we've traded one threat for another." Kang rose and walked to a small cabinet. She removed 2 glasses and a bottle containing an amber liquid. "This is whiskey. An earth drink. Would you like to try it? Our medical team confirms it's safe for your physiology." The sudden shift caught Tay off guard, but he nodded. Cultural exchange was part of diplomacy. She poured 2 glasses and handed one to him. "We're not conquerors, Ambassador. We were invited." Tay took a cautious sip and managed not to grimace at the burning sensation. "Your ships have deployed throughout our territory with remarkable speed and efficiency." "Of course they have," Kang replied, taking her own drink. "That's what we do. We adapt, we plan, we execute, which is precisely what concerns my people." Tay set his glass down. "Human efficiency is intimidating. The way you fought at Nexus, Prime, taking casualties, sacrificing ships for tactical advantage. It's alien to us in the most fundamental sense." Kang considered him for a long moment. "Do you know why we agreed to help the Concord, Ambassador? Beyond the strategic advantages or potential alliance benefits, I assumed it was to demonstrate your military capability to potential rivals. A small smile crossed her face. That's very human thinking. But no, we came because you asked. Because somewhere in our long, bloody history, we learned that stronger individuals have a responsibility to protect those who can't protect themselves. Taya found himself studying her face, searching for deception. How did your species become so efficient at warfare, Admiral? So comfortable with violence? On Earth, everything was trying to kill us, Kang said simply, refilling their glasses. Our planet has extreme temperature variations, natural disasters, predators, diseases. We either became efficient or we died. She paused. But we also learned to protect what matters. Right now, that includes your people. Even at the cost of your own lives. Especially then. She leaned forward. Here's something your people don't seem to understand about humans, Ambassador. We don't value peace because we're afraid of war. We value peace because we know exactly what war costs. Every human can trace their ancestry back to both victims and warriors. It's in our blood, both the violence and the determination to find something better. Tay absorbed this, trying to reconcile the apparent contradiction. Your ships are establishing permanent positions in our space. Will they leave when the Dominion is defeated? If that's what the Concord wants, yes. Kang's answer was immediate and confident. But consider this. The galaxy now knows that humans will fight for the Concord. That alone may deter future threats. As Tay prepared to leave, a final question occurred to him. Your people evolved on what we would consider a death world. High gravity, extreme climates, dangerous predators. By all logic, such conditions should have produced solely selfish survivors. Yet you're here, protecting strangers across the galaxy. Why? Admiral Kang walked him to the shuttle bay before answering. Perhaps because we learned that survival alone isn't enough. The real evolutionary advantage came when we stopped just surviving our death world and started mastering it. Not alone, but together. As his shuttle departed the human flagship, Tay watched the massive vessel grow smaller against the backdrop of stars. The Concord had begged for help, and that help had arrived in a form they never expected. Not just powerful allies, but a fundamental challenge to how they understood the galaxy. The humans hadn't simply brought ships and weapons. They had brought a perspective forged in fire, that strength carries responsibility, that peace is worth fighting for, and that the greatest achievement isn't just surviving harsh conditions, but thriving despite them. For better or worse, the galaxy had changed forever. And as Tay prepared his report for the Council, he realized the most important thing the Concord could learn from humans wasn't their technology or tactics. It was their paradoxical nature, their capacity for both terrible violence and profound protection, their willingness to die for principles, their understanding that the harshest environments don't just create monsters, they can also forge guardians. The universe had always seen humans as dangerous Deathworlders. Perhaps now it would understand why.